Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something that might make you look at your everyday life a little differently. It's microplastics.
Yeah.
And we're going to uncover what they are, where they're hiding, and how they could be impacting us.
It is a bit unsettling when you realize just how pervasive these tiny plastic particles are. I mean, they're not just in the ocean. They're in our food, our water, the air we breathe.
Oh, yeah.
And even our blood.
That's right. And that fact that they've been found in human blood is a pretty alarming wake-up call.
Yeah.
It really highlights the urgency of understanding this issue.
For sure.
So to start, can you explain what microplastics actually are?
So microplastics are essentially any fragments of plastic less than 5 millimeters in size.
Okay.
To give you an idea of how small that is, a human hair is about 75 micrometers wide, and microplastics can be even smaller than that.
Wow.
We even have nanoplastics, which are 1,000 times smaller than that.
Wow. That's incredibly tiny.
Yeah.
It's no wonder they're so hard to even detect, let alone remove from the environment.
Exactly. And the problem is, these microplastics can take hundreds to thousands of years to degrade. So they're essentially accumulating in the environment.
Right.
And new research shows that a staggering 8 million tons of plastic enters the oceans every year.
Wow.
That's much higher than previous estimates.
It's almost unfathomable, how much plastic is ending up in our oceans and ultimately the environment as a whole. But how are these microplastics even getting there? Where are they coming from?
So there are two main categories: primary and secondary microplastics. Primary microplastics are tiny particles that are manufactured to be small.
Okay.
Think of microbeads found in some cosmetics.
Right.
Despite bans on microbeads in many countries, some products still contain them because of loopholes in legislation and lack of enforcement in some areas.
It's amazing how even with regulations, some of these microplastics are still slipping through the cracks.
Yeah.
What about secondary microplastics? Where do they come from?
Secondary microplastics are the result of larger plastic items breaking down over time.
Oh.
Think of your everyday plastic bottles, shopping bags, or fishing gear.
Right.
As these items are exposed to the elements, they fragment into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually becoming microplastics.
So even when we think we're disposing of plastic properly, it can still contribute to the microplastic problem.
Absolutely.
What are some other surprising sources of microplastic pollution?
Well, one major contributor is actually tire wear. As tires wear down, they release tiny particles of rubber, which is a type of plastic, into the environment.
I had no idea tire wear was such a significant source. What about our clothes? I've heard that washing synthetic fabrics can release microplastics.
That's right. Clothing made from synthetic fibers like polyester and nylon shed tiny microfibers every time we wash them.
Okay.
These fibers end up in the wastewater and eventually make their way into the environment.
That's pretty disturbing. It makes you think twice about fast fashion and the mountains of clothes we consume and discard.
Yep.
Are there any other everyday activities that contribute to this?
Yes, even simple things like construction and renovation generate a lot of dust. And that dust can contain microplastics from materials like PVC and from the use of power tools.
It seems like microplastics are lurking everywhere. We've covered a lot of the sources, but how are these tiny particles actually getting into our bodies?
Well, there are three main routes of exposure: ingestion, inhalation, and dermal contact. We ingest microplastics through the food we eat and the water we drink.
So things like seafood and bottled water, which we often think of as healthy choices, could actually be exposing us to these microplastics.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Studies have shown that seafood can ingest microplastics, and a significant percentage of bottled water samples contain microplastic contamination. It's a bit ironic that people often choose bottled water over tap water thinking it's purer, when in reality it could be exposing them to microplastics.
That's a good reminder to be more mindful of our choices. We've covered ingestion, but what about inhalation? How are we breathing in microplastics?
Microplastics are present in dust and air pollution, particularly in urban areas. So just by breathing or taking in these tiny plastic particles, it's unsettling to think that we can't even escape them in the air we breathe.
It seems there's no escape from these microplastics. They're in our food, water, and air. Is there any other way we could be exposed?
The third route of exposure is dermal contact, primarily through personal care products. While many countries have restricted the use of microbeads in cosmetics, some products still contain them. Plus, there are other types of microplastics that can be found in lotions, creams, and other personal care items.
So we could be absorbing these microplastics through our skin when we use these products.
It's certainly a possibility. While research on dermal absorption of microplastics is still ongoing, it's another potential route of exposure to consider. It seems like microplastics are coming at us from all angles.
It really does feel that way. This is a lot to take in. So far, we've learned that microplastics are practically everywhere and that we're exposed to them in a variety of ways. But what are the actual health effects of this exposure? What does the research tell us?
Well, while research on the health effects of microplastics is still in its early stages, there's growing evidence that they could pose risks to human health. Studies have shown that microplastics can cause inflammation and damage to the digestive system.
We hear a lot about gut health these days. It's concerning to think that these tiny plastic particles could be disrupting our digestive systems. Are there any other potential health risks?
There's also concern about microplastics interfering with the immune system, potentially weakening our body's natural defenses.
Our immune systems are already bombarded with so many challenges in the modern world. It's worrisome to think that microplastics could be adding to that burden. What else are researchers looking into?
One area of concern is the potential for microplastics to act as transport vehicles for harmful chemicals and pathogens. They can bind to and carry toxins, bacteria, and viruses, potentially transporting them into the body.
That's a chilling thought. It's not just the microplastics themselves we need to worry about, but also what they might be carrying with them. Are there any specific concerns about the types of things they might be transporting?
There are even concerns about microplastics transporting antibiotic-resistant bacteria into the body.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Antibiotic resistance is already a major public health threat, and the thought of microplastics potentially exacerbating this problem is extremely alarming.
Another area of growing concern is the impact of microplastics on hormone function and reproductive health. The discovery of microplastics in human placentas and breast milk has raised significant alarm.
It's disturbing to think that these tiny particles could be present in such vital tissues. What are the potential implications of this?
Well, while more research is needed to understand the long-term effects, it raises serious questions about the potential for microplastics to disrupt delicate hormonal balances and potentially affect reproductive health.
It's frightening to consider the long-term consequences, especially for future generations.
And we also need to consider the impact of inhaled microplastics on respiratory health. We already know that air pollution poses significant risks, and microplastics just add another layer of complexity to that problem.
Yeah. It's alarming to think that we could be inhaling these tiny plastic particles with every breath, especially in urban areas with higher levels of air pollution. Are there any other health concerns related to microplastics that researchers are investigating?
Well, a particularly concerning finding is a newly identified disease in seabirds called plasticosis. This disease is caused by the buildup of scar tissue in the bird's digestive tracts as a result of ingesting plastic. It's a stark reminder of the potential damage these particles can cause.
That's heartbreaking. It makes you wonder if there are parallels to human health that we haven't fully discovered yet.
Right. And another area of active research is the potential for microplastics to magnify the effects of other toxins. For example, some studies suggest that microplastics can increase the toxicity of cadmium, a heavy metal found in the environment.
Oh, wow. That's a serious concern. It means we're not just dealing with the microplastics themselves, but also their potential to amplify the dangers of other pollutants. It paints a rather grim picture. Is there any hope? Are there any solutions on the horizon to address this pervasive problem?
Thankfully, yes. There are a number of initiatives and solutions being explored and implemented around the world. One significant step has been the ban on microbeads in cosmetics in many countries.
Okay.
It's a step in the right direction, although loopholes and lack of enforcement still exist in some areas.
It's encouraging to see some progress being made. Are there any efforts to tackle the problem of plastic pollution more broadly?
Well, there's a growing push for legislation to reduce plastic production and pollution overall. Some countries are leading the way in this area. Japan, for example, has passed a bill aimed at reducing microplastic production and pollution, particularly in aquatic environments.
That's promising. Are any other countries taking similar actions?
The UK and the EU have also implemented bans on microbeads and are exploring broader restrictions on intentionally added microplastics in various products. It's encouraging to see a global movement building to tackle this issue.
It sounds like policymakers are starting to recognize the seriousness of this threat. Are there any innovative solutions emerging from the scientific community?
One exciting area of research is focused on plastic-eating microorganisms.
Okay.
Scientists are studying various bacteria and fungi that have the ability to break down certain types of plastic. It sounds like something out of science fiction, but it has the potential to be a game changer in how we address plastic waste.
That's incredible. Are there any efforts to develop alternative materials to reduce our reliance on plastic in the first place?
Absolutely. Researchers are working hard to find materials that are biodegradable or more easily recyclable.
Right.
This is crucial to reducing the amount of plastic that ends up in the environment.
It's heartening to hear about these scientific advancements, but what about the vast amount of plastic that's already polluting our planet? Are there any large-scale efforts to clean up this mess?
Well, there are a number of ocean cleanup projects underway. These initiatives use a variety of technologies to collect and remove plastic waste from the ocean.
Right.
They offer a glimmer of hope, but it's a monumental task.
It's encouraging to know that these cleanup efforts are taking place. But are there any advancements in how we treat our wastewater to prevent microplastics from entering the environment in the first place?
Researchers and engineers are developing and improving wastewater treatment technologies to capture microplastics more effectively.
Okay.
These advancements are essential to reducing the flow of microplastics into our waterways.
It sounds like there are a lot of different approaches being explored. But even with all these initiatives, it seems like public awareness is still lacking. Many people are unaware of the extent of the microplastic problem.
You're right. Raising public awareness is crucial. We need more education to inform people about the issue and empower them to make informed choices.
What are some simple things that individuals can do to make a difference? We've learned about all these sources of microplastic pollution. Is there anything we can do in our everyday lives to reduce our contribution to the problem and minimize our exposure?
One of the most impactful actions is to reduce our reliance on single-use plastics. We can choose reusable water bottles, coffee cups, and shopping bags. We can also be more mindful of the clothes we buy, opting for natural fibers whenever possible.
Those are great suggestions. It's about making conscious choices and breaking our dependence on disposable plastic items. Are there other steps we can take at home to reduce our exposure?
Washing our clothes less frequently and using laundry bags designed to capture microfibers are simple steps that can make a difference. Some washing machines now even come with built-in microfiber filters.
That's great to know. What about microplastics in bottled water? Is there a way to avoid them entirely?
The simplest way is to choose tap water instead. If taste is a concern, you can use a water filter pitcher or install a filter on your faucet.
It's about being aware of the hidden sources of microplastics and finding ways to minimize our exposure. What about the fishing industry? We learned earlier that discarded fishing gear is a major source of microplastics. What can be done to address this problem?
There are organizations and initiatives working on solutions to reduce the amount of fishing gear that ends up in the ocean. Some are developing biodegradable fishing gear, while others are working on technologies to retrieve and recycle ghost nets.
It sounds like there's a lot of work being done, but the microplastic problem can feel overwhelming. What message would you give to listeners who might be feeling discouraged?
Well, I understand the concern. It's a massive challenge, but we can't lose hope. The fact that so many people are working on solutions is reason for optimism. Every action we take, no matter how small, can contribute to a healthier planet.
It's a collective effort. It requires individuals, businesses, and governments to work together to find solutions.
Exactly. We need collaboration and innovation across all sectors to create a more sustainable future. Individual actions are essential, but we also need to hold corporations accountable for their role in plastic production and pollution.
Consumers have a role to play by supporting businesses that are committed to sustainability and by advocating for stronger regulations and policies. What about the role of research in addressing this problem?
We need more research to fully understand the long-term consequences of microplastic exposure on human health. We also need continued investment in the development of effective solutions, such as biodegradable plastics and advanced wastewater treatment technologies.
Funding for research is crucial to finding lasting solutions. Are there any other key takeaways you want to leave with our listeners?
I think the most important message is that knowledge is power. The more we understand about the microplastic problem, the better equipped we are to make informed choices and take meaningful action.
Awareness is the first step towards change. And it's important to remember that we're not powerless. Even small actions can make a difference.
And it can be overwhelming to think about the scale of the problem. But it's important to remember that we're not alone in this. There is a growing global movement of people who are concerned about microplastic pollution and are working towards solutions.
It's empowering to realize that, collective action can bring about real change. We've seen it with other environmental issues.
Exactly. And just as we've seen with issues like climate change, individual actions are important, but systemic change is essential for addressing a problem as widespread as microplastic pollution.
It's been fascinating to delve into the world of microplastics with you today. We've uncovered some disturbing truths about the pervasiveness of these tiny particles and the potential risks they pose to human and environmental health. But we've also learned about the incredible work being done by scientists, policymakers, and everyday individuals to find solutions.
I agree. It's a complex issue with far-reaching implications, but it's one that we can tackle if we work together.
Yeah, what stands out to me is how this issue connects to so many other challenges we face today. Microplastics touch upon climate change, ocean health, human health, consumer choices, corporate responsibility, and even social justice.
You're right. It highlights the interconnectedness of our world and how our actions have ripple effects far beyond our immediate surroundings.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of microplastics, is there a final thought you'd like to leave our listener with?
I'd like to emphasize that while the situation is serious, it's not hopeless. We have the knowledge, the tools, and the collective will to make a difference. By understanding the problem, making informed choices, and advocating for change, we can create a future where microplastics are no longer a threat to our health and our planet.
That's a powerful message of hope and empowerment. It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.